Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 36 from the Road to Latin textbook. Now we're going to look at the first story, which is called De Numeris Romanis. Now this is a little different because, as you can tell from the title, it's about Roman numbers. So this is one of these chapters that has a very specific sort of topic. It's not going to advance the plot at all, even though it does involve the boys and going to school and learning. But it's still a good chance to kind of see a slightly complicated grammar idea of Roman numbers, right? And well, not really Roman numerals, more Roman numbers. And you'll be able to see as you go through the story how they work by seeing just vast repetition of them in context. Okay, and this will answer the question I always get asked of why we don't learn how to count in Latin until later on in our Latin careers. This chapter will answer that for you. Okay, so before you dive into it with a new chapter, like I always tell you, the first thing you want to do is learn the vocab, practice it, make sure you feel really confident because it's hard to understand. What's going on and read the Latin if you don't know what the words mean. Particularly in this chapter, there's a lot of numbers, things like that. And if you want to do that, I always tell you to take a look at Nova Latin. You can find the vocab list, you can find Quizlets, games, a bunch of stuff to kind of help you out. But always start there with learning the vocab. That's always step one. The other thing you want to do is read the story aloud, right? Don't just translate it in your head. Read it aloud. Find a partner in class, someone you can read it to, work on your speaking, your pronunciation, then have them read it back to you so you can work on your listening skills. That's how you get really good at reading Latin, not just kind of translating in your head. You don't want to shut those parts of your brain off. You need them to become the best sort of version of a Latin student you can be. Okay, so don't shut those off. Always do that. The other thing that I encourage you to do is as you read and try to translate this, use the read and reread method. I say this in all my videos, but it works. You read through the story, write down any problem areas you have. It could be vocab, grammar, whatever it is, write it down. When you get to the end of the story, take a look at your list. The vocab is always simple. You just look it up in the dictionary. Not a major deal, but you'll be able to figure it out. The grammar is trickier. It could be some old grammar that's got you tripped up. Maybe you forgot a tense, something like that. But more often than not, it's the new grammar, and that's fine. It just shows you need to look through the grammar and really practice it, which I always encourage you to do, right? At least do a little bit of work in the grammar so the story can bring it to life for you. But either way, you'll be able to catch that when you make a list of what's tripping you up. You work on those things, then you go back, you read the story again and again and again as many times as you need to until you can read through it from start to finish without needing any vocab help, without having to look up any grammar, and that you can understand all of it or pretty close to all of it. That's always a sign that you're ready to move on. Okay, so I'd always encourage you to do that first. That way you're getting the most out of these stories, because again, these stories are designed to give you mass repetition on the grammar in context. So it's just easier if you kind of have that under your belt. Okay, so like I said, the first thing you want to do, or one of the first things, is get the grammar. Now I'll give you a quick overview here, but I've already made a video on Latin numbers, right? Which I think will be a little more in depth and a little easier to follow. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. Just take a look at the YouTube channel. You'll find it in one of the playlists. But it just gives you a little more in-depth sort of overview of what you need to do for this chapter. So I'd encourage you to go there. But the overview, the quick overview is this, right? And we'll just go through it quickly. You have two different types of numbers, right? Ordinal and cardinal. So cardinal numbers come from the word cardo, which means like a hinge, right? They're the most important ones. That kind of hinges on everything else. And these are numbers you're really used to: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Also the sort of standard or basic numbers that we use in English. Same thing in Latin. Okay. Now the trick here is the numbers 1, 2, and 3 have case and gender. They don't have number because they are numbers, right? So 1 is singular and 2 and 3 are plural, if that makes sense. So technically they do, but the case and gender part is tricky. So if I'm saying one boy, that's different than one girl, which is different from one building, right? So the gender, the grammatical gender, really does play a role, which makes this trickier. And it's part of why you don't just learn the number for one, right? Because when you have case and number, there's 10 different ways you could write the number 1. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, 1, right? So this is something my students always ask me: why don't we learn Latin numbers? This is the reason why, right? They're trickier than you might think. So you can see in the example I gave here, 1 is unus, right? But it's unus a 2 is duo, dui, duo, and 3 is tres, tres, tria, right? There's different genders involved. So that's something you just have to get used to, and the chapter kind of lays it out for you, okay? The rest of the numbers, though, are set. They don't change. So, for instance, the number 4 will always be quatuor, right? You don't have to worry about any sort of case or gender. It's just, 4 of whatever you're talking about. It's always the number 4. So that makes it a little bit easier, okay? On the other side, we have ordinal numbers. And you can kind of tell from the name, it sounds like the word order in English, which is what they do, right? They tell you the order of something. So instead of the number 1, you have the order first. And instead of 2, you have second, right? So first, second, third, fourth, fifth are about organizing and ordering something. These are what we call ordinal numbers, English and Latin. Okay, so the ordinal numbers are a little bit easier because they're using usa endings, right? First and second declension adjective endings. So they all use it. So every ordinal number has a case number and gender, right? I guess again, number is the kind of sketchy one because they are numbers, but still they're all going to end in usa. So if I'm trying to say first, it depends on the noun I'm describing. It could be the first, again, the first boy, the first girl, the first building. It's going to change my ending a little bit because of the gender. Okay, so it takes a little bit of getting used to, but again, there's a lot of practice you can find in the textbook, or take a look at my website. You'll find practice exercises there, Magistrula, things like this, that'll just kind of help you get through. And once you get used to it, it's much easier than it sounds, but at first it can be kind of jarring to figure out what these numbers are or how they work. The last thing you're seeing, and it kind of connects, are pronominal adjectives. So these are basically irregular adjectives. It's kind of the simplest way to think of it. And they include like the number one, right? Unos right, is slightly different when you look at how the endings work. And again, check the textbook, you'll see it. But also nullus, which means none, totus, which means whole, ulus, which means any, solus, which means only or alone. Then you have neuter, neuter, uter, alter, alias. These 9 adjectives are basically irregular. So the easiest thing you can do is just memorize their endings through use, right? So when you see them in the chapter, you'll see a bunch of them. Look at the ending, practice it. The more you see them, the kind of more used to them you get. So it's as simple as that, right? You can make this difficult and memorize all the endings. Maybe that's what you're doing in class, but I think it's easier to kind of see it in context. And again, if you read through the textbook, there's a really good description in here in Road to Latin that'll explain it for you. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move forward and look at the story, and I'll assume that you've done all this background work. If you haven't looked at the grammar, or you haven't practiced anything or read on your own, pause the video, go do that, and then when you're ready, come back and use the rest of the video, as sort of a double check to make sure that you're on the right track. Again, my translations don't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to be exactly the same as mine, but it should give you kind of a guide so that you can feel comfortable that you're ready to move on. Okay. So story starts like this. We're back with Orbilius, the teacher, and it's going to be talking about the boys in school, which makes sense because they're learning numbers. And it goes like this. You have est hora tertia et Orbilius parvus pueros numeros docet. Okay, so it's saying it's the tertia ora. Now, tertia is an ordinal number, right? It doesn't mean it's the 3 hour, although you can kind of recognize the word 3. It's ordinal, so it means it's the 3rd hour. Okay. And again, the 3rd hour doesn't mean like 3 in the morning. So I think I've mentioned this in videos. If you haven't looked up Roman time, I'd encourage you to do that as sort of a culture unit. It's talking about the 3rd hour after sunrise, which we usually kind of peg around 6 a.m. So that's one way to think of it. 6 to 7 is the 1st hour, 7 to 8 would be the 2nd hour, and 8 to 9 would be the 3rd hour. So that's what they're talking about here when they say the 3rd hour. But notice it's tertia, one of our ordinal numbers. So it's the 3rd hour, and Orbilius docet, he's teaching numeros, numbers, to the parvos pueros, right, the small boys. So you're saying he's teaching the small boys numbers, right? He's teaching that account. Then you have numeri ab uno ad viginti docentur. Okay, so the numeri, the numbers from 1, uno, ad viginti to 20, docentur, are being learned, right? So the numbers 1 to 20 are being learned by the boys, is kind of the implication. Non omnes discipuli sunt diligentes. So not all the discipuli, the students, are diligent, right? Diligentes, they're not all kind of working hard. Alius numerorum memor eret, alius oblitus. Okay, so some of the boys, so here when you have alius, right, these are called correlatives, meaning that they go together, right? So you usually see them sort of in pairs. So when you see alias, that means like the one. Then alias again means the other. You're comparing 2 different boys here, 2 different students. So you're saying one will be eret memor numerorum, right? Memor means like mindful. So one will be mindful of numbers, numerorum, meaning he's good at the numbers. And another alias oblitus. You're implying the eret there. So another will be oblitus, meaning forgetful. So it means one is going to remember all the numbers and the other one is going to forget them. So it's kind of a mixed bag on who's doing well in the class. Then you have ali bene, ali mali, respondebunt. Okay, so some, here we have ali, same thing. So some and others. So alius meant one because it's singular. Ali means some because it's plural. It's the same word though. Okay, so it's saying some respondebunt, they will respond bene, well, right, meaning they're going to get the answer correct. Others, and again we're implying respondebunt, will respond male, bad, right, badly. So some will respond well, others will respond badly. It's meaning some get it and some of them just don't. Okay, and there you have the sort of the irregular adjective, right? Alius. We saw it in context in those two sentences. Then we have a quote, right? And we're starting to get into the numbers. We have unus, duo, tres, quator, quinque, sex, septem, octo, novem, decem, respondet puer primus, right? So the boy is counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and down the line. Now you notice here I highlighted unus, duo, and tres in red because they are nominative. Remember the numbers 1, 2, and 3 have case and gender. So technically these are all masculine, okay? You could have said una and duai and down the line, right? But that's why they're highlighted. And then the rest of the numbers, 4 through 10, are not. It's because they don't have the case or the gender, right? So quator, meaning 4, is always spelled quator. Okay, so 1 through 10 responds the pua primus, the first boy. Again, notice primus, our ordinal number. Okay, then you have bene inquit Orbilius. So good, well done, right? Says Orbilius. So Orbilius says the first boy, he can count to 10. He gives him a good job, right? A well done. Then we keep going, and you have Orbilius secundum puerum reliquos numeros roga. Okay, so Orbilius Rogat, he asks the secundum puerum, the second boy. Again, it's an ordinal number. He's the second one because we already had the first. So he asked a second boy the reliquos numeros, the remaining numbers. So he says, 1 to 10, perfect. Where are the rest of them? And the boy responds. He says, nescio. Right? Nescio means I don't know. So nescio respondet is puer. So I don't know responds this boy. So this second boy says, I can only go to 10, right? He's not really doing well. Orbilius eum non lauda, right? So Orbilius does not praise him. So the boy who couldn't count past 10 doesn't get any pat on the back, right? He's not doing well. Then we have laudator opus alterius sed opus alterius reprehenditor, okay? So you have these boys, right? One's kind of doing well and the other one's not. So it's saying the opus alterius, right? So the opus means the work, okay? And notice you have alterius here. That's one of our irregulars. So it's saying the work of one, right? It's the genitive form of alter. So the work of one, laudator, is praised, but the work of another, right? And again, alterius is spelled the same way for both. It means one and another because it's singular. Okay, if you pluralize it, it means some and others. Okay, so the work of one is praised, but the work of another, reprehenditor, is scolded, right? So it's saying, one kid did well and the other one just didn't do very well. All right. Then you have alter domi diligente laboravera, alter non laboravera. Okay, so one of them, again, you have alter, the correlatives here. So one had worked, laboraverat is pluperfect. So one had worked diligenter, diligently, domi, at home. So one of them did his homework. Okay, good lesson for you out there. So one did his homework and he's doing well. The other, non laboraverat, had not worked. And the implication is domi, at home. So one of them didn't do his homework and he's really struggling with the numbers. Then you have tum tertius respondent. Undecem, duodecem, tredecem, quatordecem, quindecem, sedecem, septendecem, duodewigenti, undewigenti, wigenti. Okay, so then a tertius, a third respondet, responds. So the third boy steps up, right? And he continues on. Here, and again, you can see this if you watch my video on numbers. When you get to the numbers past 10, a lot of Romance languages do this. Undecem literally means 1 plus 10, right? So 1 in 10 is 11. Duodecem, 2 in 10 is 12. Tredecem, right? 3 in 10 is 13. So these are the numbers 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, septendecem, right? 7 plus 10. When you get to 18, again, a lot of languages do this. Duodewiginti literally means 2 from 20. Wiginti means 20, so there's a subtraction problem happening here. So 18 is listed as not 8 plus 10, but 20 minus 2. Right, just for whatever reason. So duodewiginti, 2 from 20, 18, undewiginti is 19, and wiginti is 20. Okay, so that third boy steps up and saves the day, and he's able to count from 11 to 20. Okay? Then we continue on, right? You have more dialogue. You have a question. Quis omnes numeros sci? Right? So who, right? Quis is the who question. So it says who, and this is where Billy is talking, who knows omnes numeros, all the numbers. So one kid could get from 1 to 10, the other kid got from 11 to 20, or Billy says who knows all of them. Then you have a response, ego numeros scio, right? I know the numbers. Scio, I know the numbers. Bene eos memoria teneo clamat Titus. So bene eos memoria teneo. Teneo means I'm holding. So teneo memoria literally means like I'm holding in memory. I remember is really the euphemism here, or the idiom, I guess. So he says, I remember them, eos, bene, well. So he comes in hot and he's like, yeah, I know all of them. Don't worry about it, right? Shouts Titus. Then you have Titus magnum laudem accipit. So Titus, he receives or gets magnum laudem, great praise. So he's able to do all the numbers. So he's praised for being, so smart, he gets the great praise. Then we have another question, quote digitos claudi habes. So quote means how many, right? It's one of these interrogative words, right? She's asking a question. You see it all the time with numbers, right? A lot of textbooks will do this, just give you number problems to work on it. So he's saying, how many digitos, how many fingers, habes, do you have? Literally, you have how many fingers is another way of putting it. And Claudia here is the vocative. He's talking to Claudius. So he says, hey, Claudius, how many fingers do you have? Right? And the boy responds, decem digitos habeo. Right? I have 10 fingers, right? Nicely done. Then we have another question. We have si uni digito adontor duo digiti, quote digiti sunt, right? So if two digiti, duo digiti, right? Two fingers, there we go, are added adontor to uni digito, to one finger, how many fingers digiti sunt are there? So he says, if I add two fingers to one finger, literally what's 1 plus 2, how many fingers do I have? And the boy responds, tres digiti sunt, respondet puer quintus. So the puer quintus is the fifth boy. So we're kind of going down the line here. The fifth boy steps up and he says, yeah, you've got 3 fingers, tres digiti, right? You can sort of imagine him holding up fingers like a little child would do. Then we have another question, si duobus digitis quinque digiti aduntor, quote digiti sunt. Okay, so another problem. And this is where the book is just trying to give you repetition on the numbers. So it says, if quinque digiti, right, are added aduntor to duobus digitis, how many do we have? So again, the quinque there, he's asking if you had 5 fingers, right, quinque digiti, added to duo, right, to 2, right, duobus digitis, how many fingers are there? So he's basically saying, what's 5 plus 2? But now we have a problem. The puer sextus, right? So nescio respondet puer sextus. So the 6th boy in line in the questioning responds nescio, I don't know. So this kid is not able to do math problems apparently, or doesn't know how to hold up his fingers. Something's going wrong, and he doesn't know the problem that's being asked by Orbilius. Okay. Then we continue on. You have is timet, quote Orbilius certe eum castigaba, or castigabit rather. So is is he, meaning that 6th boy, right, the puer sextus. So he's afraid, timet, because Orbilius certainly castigabit will chastise, will yell at eum, him, right, will castigate him, you might say in English. So he's going to yell at him, or sort of chastise, I guess, is punish, maybe is a good way to do it, a simpler version. So he says Orbilius certainly will punish him, right, it's future tense. Then you have tum Orbilius septimum voca et roga. Si tribus digiti septem digiti aduntor, quote digiti sunt. Okay, so the 6th boy is really afraid he's going to get yelled at, but Orbilius just kind of moves on to the septimum, the 7th boy. So you have tum Orbilius, then Orbilius vocat, he calls and asks the septimum, the 7th, meaning the septimum puerum, the 7th boy. So he kind of moves on to boy number 7, and he says, if septem digiti, 7 digits aduntor, are added to tribus digitis, to 3 digits, right, 3 fingers, quote digiti sunt, how many fingers are there? So he says, what's 7 plus 3? Then you have is quoque respondet nescio. Uh-oh, here we go, 6 and 7, not good. So the 7th boy also responds nescio, I don't know. Right, so he has no clue either. Then you have nunc magister iratus ambos pueros pigros ad se voca. So now the magister, the teacher, iratus, the angry teacher, he vocat, he calls ad se, to himself, calls to him ambos pueros pigros, right? Both lazy boys. So he's already calling them lazy because they don't know their numbers, right? And they were supposed to. So he calls them up, right? You can imagine being a student, you get called up to the teacher, right? They're in trouble. Then you have animus nutrius est laetus, right? So the animus, the mind, right? So the mind of neither. Nutrius is similar to alterius, we saw earlier in the story. It's one of the irregulars. It comes from the word neither, right? It's where you get neuter gender from. So it's saying the mind of neither, so neither's mind, is happy, right? Is est laetus, right? Their spirit, their mind, I guess. Neither one of them is happy, right? Because they've been called up and they know they're about to get in trouble. Then you have Orbilius cum studio ambos castigat, right? Here it comes. So Orbilius with zeal, love that, cum studio, with a lot of energy, he punishes the boys, right? He punishes ambos, both of them. So I don't know if he's hitting them, yelling at him, he's doing something. And these boys are being punished because they don't know their numbers, okay? Then we get to the end of the story. And we have utri laus cras dabitur, okay? So the praise, the utri here, right, kind of means like which one of the two, right? And it's dative, so it's saying to which, right, will praise laus, right, will praise be given, dabitur, tomorrow, cross. So literally, praise will be given to which one tomorrow. So it's meaning of all the boys who didn't know what was going on. So boys 6 and 7, it's saying, are any of them going to do well tomorrow? Right? Who's going to get praise tomorrow? Then you continue of cras ambo pueri laudabuntur. Right? So laudabuntur. There we go. So it's saying tomorrow, right? Both boys, ambo pueri, both boys will be praised, laudabuntur. Right? So they're going to both figure it out tomorrow. They're going to go home and study apparently and be fine. Then you have omnes quidam pueri laudabuntur. So omnes pueri, all the boys, so indeed, quidam, so indeed, all the boys will be praised, right? So they're all going to do better tomorrow, right? They weren't so great, some of them today. Then you have nulli discipuli erant numerorum obliti, sed omnes totam oram cum diligentia laborabunt. Okay, so nulli discipuli, none of the students, right, erant will be obliti, forgetful, numerorum, of their numbers. That's the phrase we saw at the beginning of the story. So none of the students will be forgetful of their numbers, but omnes, all of them, laborabunt, they will work, right, cum diligentia, with diligence, for the totam oram. There's the accusative showing duration of time, for the whole hour. Okay, so they're all going to work hard tomorrow in their lesson and do better than they did today. Okay, so this story again is just sort of a side note to the plot. Not that there's any really overarching plot in Road to Latin, but it's just a side note to give you sort of in the context of a story a way to work on numbers. So what better way to do it than to kind of mimic what Roman school children will go through, schoolboys in this case. So again, focus on the numbers. It's giving you a lot of repetition on not only the cardinal but the ordinal numbers, and then you're seeing a lot of those irregular adjectives as well. Right. And it all just gives you good practice so you can see them in context and understand how they work. And you can do this on your own, right? You can do little math problems, or your teacher might do it. How many fingers do I have? If I have 2 plus 3, what's 1 plus 4? These are a lot of the similar things you see in almost every textbook that deals with Latin numbers. But it's really good practice, right? It simplifies it and helps you understand what's going on. So this chapter didn't have a lot of complex like tenses, anything like that. It's all present tense, I think a little bit of future. So it was more on the repetition of the new words and the new numbers. If you have any questions at all on it, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'm always happy to help you out. Just let me know what you need. But otherwise, keep practicing, keep at it, right? Do the read and reread method, and you're looking for that moment where you're able to read through the entire story without needing any help. That's how you know you're ready to move on. Good luck with it.